Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man sara sabilihi ila yawmiddin, amma ba'd. So in continuing discussing the book that is titled Mukhtasar Ahadith, As-Siyam, Ahkam, Wala Adab, and the book is in the translation, Ahadith, about fasting, its rulings and manners, and it's an abridgment, and this is a book that has been authored by Sheikh Abdullah ibn Salih al-Fawzan. So in the previous lesson we have discussed concerning these ahadith, or what the author, Hafidullah, have mentioned regarding some of the matters that pertains to the ahkam of siyam. So the reminder to the Muslim regarding in going through the act of siyam, that these are the things that one should be mindful of and aware of. So in the last lesson that we had discussed regarding that we had covered up to the hadith that the author, Hafidullah, he mentions as follows. The next hadith that to be discussed concerning the hadith of Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu قال سافرت مع رسول الله عليه السلام في رمضان ولم يعب الصائم على مفطر ولا مفطر على صائم متفق عليه. So that's the hadith that to be discussed, which is the author rahimahullah or hafidullah that I've mentioned regarding the hadith of Anas bin Malik, that meaning of which is, I traveled with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger alayhi salam during Ramadan. The one fasting did not criticize the one who was not fasting, and the one who was not fasting did not criticize the one who was fasting, and this hadith is mentioned by Bukhari and Muslim. So regarding concerning this hadith is to discuss concerning, as he mentioned here as the heading, hadith regarding the ruling of fasting for the sick and the traveler. So this hadith is what he mentioned to use as a evidence regarding the matter regarding of those matters that pertains to as-siyam, is regarding the person who is ill or the person who is traveling. What's the rule pertaining to their fasting? So on that particular matter, that it mentioned regarding concerning that with the ulama, that they discuss several matters regarding concerning this matter. So it shows regarding iftar lil musafir, as for the person who is said to be a traveler, that it is, as I mentioned, yajuz, it is permissible in general for a person to break his fast. So regarding the person who is said to be a traveler, that in general, that it is allowed for a person to break their fast. And this is mentioned by way of the Quran. So evidence for this can be found in the Quran and also in the Sunnah and also ijma. So as for evidence regarding the permissibility or the allowance for a person to break their fast, for the person who's traveling, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, where it states 185, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامِ الْأُخَرِ. So it mentioned the English rendition, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا, the one who's sick, أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ, or the person who's a traveler, the person who's in travel, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامِ الْأُخَرِ, that person can make up those days after. One can make up those days, or they can make up these days after. So this indicate that the person who is traveling or the person who is ill, that they have a rukhsa, that they have an allowance, that they're able to break their fast and make up the days later on after Ramadan. So that's something. And also this hadith also is a proof of this. And also ijma, a consensus between the ulama that is permissible. So you find the likes of An-Nawawi and Ibn Qudama who mention that in general that the permissibility regarding this act. They mention regarding concerning that of this act, regarding concerning of the person who is fasting, is it allowed? Regarding concerning that, regarding concerning the permissibility, that I mentioned, this is something form of a rukhsa. So it is said to be a form of rukhsa, a form of allowance that Islam have given for the person who is traveling, that they are allowed to break their fast and not to fast. Of the ulama regarding concerning the hukum, a general hukum regarding fasting while traveling, of the ulama who take the position that it is not allowed, of the ulama who take the position that it is not allowed for a person who is fasting, for a person who is traveling, for him to fast. So of the ulama that they hold at the person. If you're a traveler, then it's not allowed for you to fast, based upon the ayah mentioned, as the ayah mentioned, ومن كان مريض على سفر, the one who's upon a travel, فعدة من أيام أخر, that he should make up those days. So based upon them, that the person who's a traveler is not for them to fast. And that's the view taken by the Zahiriyah, amongst them Dawood al-Zahiri, and also Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, and also others that have been attributed to this qawl. Other of the ulama they have attributed this position, whereas according to them it is not it is لا يجوز للمسافر الصوم في السفر. It is not permitted for a person who is a traveler for them to fast while traveling. That's concerning that particular view, and they have taken that position. The second view of this, which is the qawl of the jumhur of the ulama, the majority of the ulama, amongst them A'immat al-Arba, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Al-Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, jami'an, and others who have the view that it is yajuz. It is permissible for a person who is a traveler that they are allowed to break their fast or fast. So there's something for them that it is allowed, so that the person who is doing so, it is something which is permissible and not per se as something which is a must, that he has to break his fast. It is something which is allowed. And that's the view taken by A'immat al-Arba, and among the Sahaba, Anas bin Malik, Jabir, Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, and others who have this view. And the evidence that they use is concerning the Ahadith of Anas bin Malik that have been mentioned. So that's concerning that particular matter. So, and the correct view is the view of the jumhur of the ulama, that regarding the person who's a musafir, a traveler, it is allowed for him to fast, and also it is allowed at times for him to not fast. So so the allowance is there. The allowance is there regarding fasting or not fasting. Of those who take the second view, that it is allowed for a person, to break their fast, to fast, or is the allowance is there, that they disagree amongst themselves regarding the second view, regarding that today is not a must for them to fast, but rather something which is allowed. There's an allowance for them to fast or not to fast. They disagree between themselves regarding that, which is preferred, which is more preferable for one to fast or one not to fast. So of those who mentioned that, in cases where the person find mashaqqa, the person who is traveling and find difficulties, he find difficulties while traveling to fast, then in such a case the person should not fast. So in that case the person should not fast, because in his travel he's finding it difficult. So in that situation he should not fast. Then I mentioned that if the other case with a person, in a case where the person find that is some difficulty, but not that very difficult, then the person is for him it's the person to make that choice. The person to make that choice regarding if there's not much difficulty that he can either maintain. So it's for him to make a khiyar. It's for him to take the one which is either he has a choice or he takes the one which is easier. So you find it easier to fast, not to fast without much difficulties, he can do so. Or if the person chooses to not fast, he can do so. But the choice is his, not to fast or to fast. The next of those matters I discussed regarding this particular matter, regarding a person traveling and fasting, regarding concerning at what point the person who is said to be a musafir, a traveler, that he can break his fast. So you might find a situation, the person is already started fasting that day, and then he's decided to travel during that day. But in the morning he already started fasting. But in the evening or later on, he's intended to travel later. At what point is he allowed to break his fast? The ulama rahimahullah have mentioned that jumhur of the ulama, that a person is allowed to break his fast when he has leave the boundaries of his city. So one is allowed to break one fast when a person have left the boundary of his city. So he have left the city, and the city is behind him, and he is traveling towards his place that he chooses to visit. So the person have left his area or left his city, then the person is said to be a musafir, and the rights of the musafir applies to him, and amongst those is that the person is allowed to break his fast. So it is not to be done while he's still within the city limits, but when he have left the city limits, then he's allowed to break his fast. So as for the person, the musafir, that he will make al-qadha, so that day that he missed in fasting, then for that person, it's for him to make qadha. So he'll make al-qadha, which is to make up for that day that has been missed. So if he missed 1 or 2 or whatever amount of days that were missed in traveling, then the person will make up those days while in travel for his travel. So of the things that we had mentioned are into that regarding the person, he is still within the city, he intends to travel, that is he allowed to break his fast while he is still within his city limits. And we said it's not, the call of Jumhur of the ulama is that the person is not allowed to do so. So while he is still within the limits of within his city, then he is not allowed to break his fast, not the point that he has left his house, but the point that he has left the bounds of the city. So when he left the bounds of the city, then he is allowed those concessions. So those are some of the masahil that relates to as-siyam. So the author here, Hafidullah, mentioned the evidence, that the hadith and the evidence that the traveler has the choice between fasting if he sees that is strong enough to fast, and not fasting if he sees that breaking fast is better for him. So it left to the person regarding if whichever one he thinks is easier for him. If there's difficulties, then it is more, ulama mentioned that is a must on him. If there's extreme difficulty, that's a must upon the person to break their fast and not to. And if there's that level of ease, whether this way or that way, then it goes back to the person's choice, whichever he thinks is more suitable and easier for him. So it is with his choice as to whichever is easier. Some of the ulama are concerning that for a person, that in general concern that for siyam, that afdal for a person who is a traveler, in that he should break his fast. Of the ulama all that the person, if he can hold to this fast, he should fast. And those who mention is based upon his choice. It's based upon his choice as to whichever is easier for the traveler. That's concerning what he mentions here regarding this particular matter. Also regarding the matter that he mentioned next, of those people, so the hadith kind of somewhat is mentioned regarding concerning of those people that have a legitimate reason to break their fast. Of those people who have a legitimate reason to break their fast, the person musafir for traveling, especially if there's difficulties, then but in general concern the person have that concession as a musafir. Then they mention the person who is ill. So the person who is ill, regarding concerning is fasting, it goes back to the musafir based upon what is being discussed here regarding with this particular matter, that it proves regarding concerning that the person of an illness where there's, what I said, a terminal illness. The person of a very severe terminal illness, but he's an adult, then the person in this case, because of the illness, then he has a right, then the person is not to fast, because you have a terminal illness that will, if fasting will make the situation worse. So the person concerned the illness, whatever illness the person may have, if by fasting will make the illness worse, the circumstance, its condition becomes worse, or it will delay the person's recovery. So if those things are present regarding the person who's ill, then that person the person is not to fast. Such a person is not to fast. Or the person with illness that is a permanent illness, that there's no cure for that person, then also that person do not fast. That person does not fast. And such a case, the person would, is also because they would not be able to make up after such a person that they feed a poor person for each day that they miss. So such a case, the person would feed a poor person for each day that is missed. So the person who said that terminal illnesses that were going to be long term, or the person find those type of cases in a person, then they will feed a person for each day that is missed. As for those cases, the person will have an illness that is somewhat severe, but then recovery is expected to be recovery before the next coming Ramadan. He will be fit before the next coming Ramadan. Then such a person, then he make up that day. Then he will count those days and make it up after Ramadan, because he's expected that he'll recover and will be fit, that he's able to fast. Then the person will make up those days after Ramadan. So it's concerning those cases regarding the person who's ill. And also you find out an illness where the person is ill but is not severe, it's very light illness. So the person might go out there, walking down the stairs, he fell and he sprained his ankle. So that's, yes, a little pain, but it's not that very severe. Now with the person, the person can bear it and continue his fast. And so in those cases, the person will observe siyam. In that case, the person will observe siyam, because it is an illness, some type of injury, but not very severe. The person cut his finger with a knife. Yes, something occurred, an injury occurred, but it's not something which is severe. So in those cases, it's a must upon the person to fast, because it's not something which is severe to the person and harmful to the person. So in that case, the person should observe a siyam. So those are another of those who are allowed to break their fast for a valid, legitimate reason. The person who's marid. Another group of people that are discussed between the ulama and is regarding concerning al-hamil wal-marda', which is concerning that the woman who's pregnant or the woman who's breastfeeding. So that's another case of those people who are discussed regarding those who are exempt and have a legitimate reason are those women who are breastfeeding and also or she's pregnant. So in this scenario, the ulama discuss concerning what are the options for them regarding concerning their siyam. What are their options, or what is the ruling pertaining to their siyam? This matter we have aqwal of the ulama. So in this matter, there's a difference between the ulama. Of the ulama regarding for the woman who's pregnant and the woman who's breastfeeding, that I mentioned that one of the view of the ulama, you have many views of the ulama who take the view regarding annahuma tuftiran, that they break their fast, meaning that the woman who is pregnant and the one who is breastfeeding, that both break their fast, and they feed a person for each day that they miss. وَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِمَا قَضَى. And third, there's no making up for them later on. So for them, in this view, this first view, it takes the position that the woman who is pregnant, the one who's also breastfeeding, what is it in Ramadan, that they break their fast, they do not fast. They're allowed to break their fast, and they will feed a poor person for each day that they missed. And they do not need to make up anything after Ramadan. So what is required from them is only for them to feed a person for each day that is missed. And there's no making up of those days after Ramadan. That view is taken by Ikramah, Sa'id ibn Jubair, Qasim ibn Muhammad, Ishaq ibn Rahuya, and others. And I mentioned also among the Sahaba, Ibn Abbas. That's been authenticated on Ibn Abbas, as mentioned by Al-Tafsir At-Tabari. And also, with Asanid, going back also in the Musnad of Ash-Shafi, that goes back to Ibn Umar, that has an authentic chain that is of this view. That as for the woman, those women who are pregnant and also breastfeeding, that they, if they choose not to fast, then they would feed a poor person for each day that is missed, and they do not make up anything after. Those days are not to be made up by way of fasting.
Only one poor person.
One per day that they miss. Each that is missed, only one person is to be fed. So if they miss 10 days, they feed 10 individuals. I just add something regarding concerning that. So of making a concern a person who's ill, that is preferred for them to do so after fasting, not before. For example, a person is ill, of a terminal illness, that I know I'm unable to fast. Right? So a person with illness that he knows that he's unable to fast for the rest of his life, for example, for as long as he knows, as he lives. Now, that person, when should he pay for the days that are missed? Can he do it, for example, I know that before Ramadan, or should it be done during Ramadan or after Ramadan? Get the picture? So that person doing it before is not to be done, because Ramadan hasn't begun. So even though he knows that he cannot fast, he shouldn't do so before Ramadan begins. So either the person for each day he pays, feed a poor person for that day, or he wait until after the end of Ramadan, then he does it, or close to the end of Ramadan, then he does it for all the days that he has missed. Like for example, the last days of Ramadan, he feeds all those people that is to be fed. Clear? So to be done not before, but more so after. So as for that, we mentioned that group of people regarding, so back to what we're discussing regarding al-hamil. So regarding the pregnant, during pregnancy, for the one who's pregnant, and also one that is breastfeeding, the first view that they are allowed to break their fast. Second, that they feed a poor person for each day that is missed. And third, they do not make up those days after Ramadan by way of fasting, because they have fulfilled what is upon them, which is they have fed a poor person for each day that is missed. The second view on this matter, annahuma, meaning concerning that, the one who's pregnant and the one who's breastfeeding, yuftiran, that they allowed to break their fast, وَيَقْضِيَانْ وَلَا يَفْدِي وَلَا فِدْيَةً, that they are not to feed someone, but they are to make up after Ramadan. So they make up when as soon as they're able. Today, the one, according to the second view, the female that is pregnant or breastfeeding, that if they break their fast, they are to make up those days as soon as they're able, and they are not to feed a poor person. So for them is for making up after Ramadan. For them is to make up after Ramadan. And that's a call that's taken by Hassan al-Basri, Ibrahim al-Nakhai, Ata al-Zuhri, and others. And also the view of Abu Hanifa and others. Also qawl, so that's concerned that, and others. So that the second view is that they should, if they break their fast, then what is expected for them is to make qadha, that they are to make up those days after Ramadan, and they are not to feed a poor person for each day that was missed. That's the second view. Of the ulama of contemporary time were more inclined towards that second view that they are mentioning concerning, that Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Muqbil, and Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, that they are more inclined towards the second view. That they make up after, and there's no fidya, there's no feeding of anyone. The third view that I mentioned in khafa ala anfusihima la ghayri aw ala anfusihima, that if they fear for themselves or for their children, so either she fear for herself or she fear for herself and her child, right? That is the pregnant and the breastfeeding. They fear for themselves and for their child. Nam, or which of the other, then they break their fast. Amongst them, for them is qada wala fidya. And there is no, so they make up, so that's also, they have to make up for what is missed. The days that are missed, they make up, and there's no fidya. They also add with this view, so that's concerning if they fear for themselves or for their child. Huh? Yes, there's a third view. So so they said their view is she fear for herself and she fear for her child, then she make up and she does not pay anything. Also they added by this, but also if she fear mainly for her child, the fear is more for the child, not for herself, comes after. So if she fear for the child, not per se herself, then in that case that I mentioned, that she breaks her fast and she make up those days, and also they pay fidya. Clear? So the one who, this view, they cannot give an explanation. They put it in a situation where if she fears for herself and her child, or she fears for just herself, then in that case, she breaks her fast and she make up the days that are missed after Ramadan, and she does not pay any fidya. Clear? Close to the view that we just mentioned before as a second view. They also add that if the fear that she has is more so not for herself, the pregnant lady or the woman who is breastfeeding, her fear is more for her child, well-being, not per se herself. She can manage, but her child may not be able to manage. But she has to breastfeed the child and so on, but is more so for the well-being of the child. That I mentioned that she breaks her fast. She makes qada of those days after Ramadan, and also she pays a fidya for each day that was missed. So she combines between both qada and fidya. Clear? That's that view. And that view is taken by Imam Shafi, a view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, and others. Now, the other view, which is the fourth view, Al-Hamil, as for a woman who is pregnant, she breaks her fast and she makes up after. And there's no fidya. The other concern, as for so they make a distinction, this view make a distinction between the one who's pregnant and the one who's breastfeeding. The one who's pregnant, she was allowed to break her fast, and also she is to make up those missed days after Ramadan, and she does not pay anything as fidya. She doesn't feed any poor person for the days that are missed. As for the case of the one who is breastfeeding and she breaks her fast, then she makes up the days that she missed, and also she pays fidya. So in this fourth view, they make a distinction between the one who is pregnant and the one who is breastfeeding. The one who is breastfeeding, her case is more for them, more severe. Or what you understand, where she has to, if she breaks her fast, she has to make up the days plus feed a poor person. And there's a fifth view that mentioned la qada alayhima, that for the woman, for both of them, for the breastfeeding woman and for the one who's pregnant, both do not make qada, and they do not make it'am, and they do not feed anyone. There's nothing upon them. So that's concerning that view, which is nothing upon them. And that view that is said to be the view of Ibn Hazm. There's nothing upon them. Allah could answer. And he mentioned that the ayat, they mentioned فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضٌ أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. It doesn't mention the woman who's breastfeeding, not pregnant. So he said that ayat, those rules doesn't apply to them. That ayah is in regarding the one who's ill and the one who's traveling, and a breastfeeding and the woman who is pregnant, they're not none of both. So those rules are not meant for them. Ala kulli hal, that regarding concerning this matter, that those are the aqwal, those are the view of the ulama regarding concerning those matters. So you find there's a khilaf between the ulama that you find concerning that qawl al-awwal. So you find the first three ones are the ones that people more are inclined towards, which are even more so the first two. The first two regarding concerning not either. So the choice is either concerns they, as you might find for some women that they have a baby this year, by the time they finish the second one, they're pregnant again. You understand? So every 2 years they're having birth. So it becomes, you understand, many years are added. So for those cases, so the first view would be, in that case, concerning more applicable in that case where that she breaks her fast and she just feed a poor person for each day and she doesn't make up anything after. And the second view, as mentioned here, is she makes up after whenever she's able. So the person concerned, that it goes back to concern that for the person, the mufti, the one who's giving that, who's responding to that, for them to see as to which view that they think is most appropriate. As all of those views, especially the first three, that many of the ulama, that they are more inclined towards them. That they are more inclined. So either, whichever one she chooses to make up, whatever thing easier for her to make up or to feed, then she takes off those of that choice. The second group another group of people is regarding those who are the woman who is concerned ahadith, the one who are nufasa, those who are those who are in their menstrual cycle, and as we'll discuss in that will be discussed in the ayah that, in the hadith that comes after. So that's concerning, they will be discussed in the hadith that comes after regarding the woman who's regarding concerning those who are going through their menstrual cycle, and also those who are after their postnatal bleeding as to their hal. So these are the ones that are mentioned regarding of those who have a legitimate or have a reason to break their fast. The thing is as to some of the general concern, the general ahkam regarding their situation. The next hadith he discussed, which is hadith number 19, that the author Hafidullah he mentioned, and Mu'adha bint Abdullah al-Adawi قالت سألت عائشة رضي عنها فقلت, so I said to her, ما بال آحذ تقضي صوم ولا تقضي الصلاة, فقالت أحرورية أنت؟ قلت لست بحرورية ولكني أسألك. قالت كان يصيبنا ذلك فنؤمر بالقضاء الصوم ولا نؤمر بالقضاء الصلاة متفق عليه. So that's the hadith is mentioned regarding in this series of hadith regarding this matter, where the author Hafidullah he mentioned the hadith of Aisha anha, where she was asked by Mu'adha bint Abdullah al-Adawiyya regarding concerning a matter, where she asked concerning why is it that a menstruating woman makes up her fasting but does not make up her prayers. Aisha anha then said to her, are you an hurriya? Hurriya concerning that is of a place, a village, where the people were said to be the Khawarij, that they kind of somewhat, it became like a base for them at some point. So Khawarij in the sense of, they were a deviant group during the history of Islam. So in the history concerning from that time, at the time, that they are those who kind of somewhat deviated regarding certain Islamic belief and also practice. So the deviation was regarding certain matters regarding Ittikaf, and that was all based upon that they were very extreme. And sometimes they take the text out of context. And that's concerning with all extreme group and deviated groups, that they normally take the text out of context. And give it a meaning that is not intended. So, and that's a common practice with all deviated groups, taking text out of context. Meaning the text, meaning the Quran, the Sunnah, they understand them contrary to what is intended. So our Haruriyah, regarding concern that was referred to as the Khawarij, then that was known for that extreme approach. Then it mentioned regarding that, I said, I am not from those people. I am just asking. So she was asking out of wanting to know. She said that menstruating during the fasting period used to happen to us. We are commanded to make up the fast, but we are not commanded to make up the prayers. Hadith muttafaqun alayhi, muttafaqun Bukhari and Muslim. So can I somewhat, Aisha anha, can I somewhat clarify to that woman, to that lady who asked for the sake of clarity. But also at that time, that it showed that approach was already established with certain groups who were known for being extreme, taking things over the top. So of those things for the Muslim to always to be mindful, not to go overboard regarding Islam. So the Khawarij or the Hurriya at that time, that their thing was Hurriya of the Khawarij, that they can, in the extreme, that they see it as certain rules, they even make it difficult. So not only the ideas were extreme, but they make things very restrictive. Now, if you're with them, you're the best of the Muslim. If you're not with them, then you're the worst of the Muslim. And you're deserving anything that they say that comes to you. That is not good, because you're not with them. And that's a mindset of people extreme. If you're with us, regardless of your shortcomings, you're still good. And the best amongst them are seen as to be the best of everything. So the good ones amongst them, they are even overly elevated. And even the bad amongst them, they're still seen as better than everyone else. That's the extreme mindset. And everyone who's not within their circle, then there's no good of you. They never acknowledge that there's good amongst you or from you. They always see you weak. They always see you as being, because you're not with us, you're not good enough. Regardless of how good you may be. But the fact that you're not with us, with them, you're not good enough with us. And that's concerning. You find the mentality of those people extreme concern, the Hurriya, that they always they always cling together. At that time, a particular village, after we might find a particular masjid where they always cling together and isolate themselves from the wider world. Clinging together like that, they help to support each other and build on each other. Clear? And that's concerning those things of the psychology, where they feed on each other. Energy and support to reinstill their extremism and make them seem as though what they're doing is accepted, because the people they are around are what? Accepting it. So that meant they support each other mentally and the likes. So regarding concern that matter, and with them concerned that of the trait you find at the extreme, one day with the person, they will praise you. Now praise that you don't even deserve it. They'll give the person a full praise. Then when you leave them, they'll condemn you with the worst of condemnation. You always see what? Extreme. Where a person whose balance is not like that. The person whose body, even when they condemn you for the qualities that are actually that you need condemnation for. The person who's extreme, he always go over the top. So you see how any group of people, when they praise a person, they go over the top. And that same person tomorrow, when he is not a part of them, then they'll condemn you to over the top condemnation. Then it shows that they're not people who are balanced in the way they look at things. Their view on things is not balanced from the start. They understand they're able to put things in proper perspective, because they go over the top. So you see that a person that know that, run away from them. Be mindful. They're not balanced. How they're able to look at things, their perspective on handling things are not proper from the start. Then I mentioned regarding concerning the hadith. So the hadith here is going to somewhat discuss concerning of those group of people, that also regarding regarding the ruling of fasting pertaining to them, regarding the woman who's the woman who's on her menstrual cycle, and the woman that is also of after child, I said that postnatal bleeding, that it is not for them to fast. And in that case, it is haram for them to fast. So it's not like recommended. It is haram for the woman who is in a menstrual cycle and the woman who is experiencing postnatal bleeding. It's haram upon them to fast. For them to fast, then they have done something haram. They have fallen into doing something which is sinful. They are doing something which is sinful. And that's from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding concerning why that is. So also with Islam, it make a distinction as the hadith. So there's a distinction regarding that the woman who in a menstrual cycle, they make up after, sort of ruling for them, because it's several days a week that they might experience this. So for them is to make up after Ramadan. So the woman goes through a menstrual cycle, then what is expected for them to make up after Ramadan. That's a must upon them to make up. So there's no fidya, paying of a ransom, or paying the person, paying for a poor person a meal. That's not for them. It's only for the menstrual woman. It's for her to make up those days after Ramadan. And also the one who's postnatal. Their thing is to make up those days after Ramadan, not by way of feeding a poor person. And also make a distinction regarding as-salat and siyam. Make a distinction between salat and siyam. So for siyam, they make up, as for salat, there's no makeup of salah. There's no makeup of the amount of salat that were missed while they were in their menstrual cycle. And that's from the bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, so it shows regarding concerning that of the ahkam of siyam, that is more specific to female, that they should be in a state of Taharah. So female, for them to fast, they must be in a state of Taharah, meaning that they are not experiencing menstrual cycle, discharge, or postnatal bleeding. So she should be free from those things. If she may have other discharge, it doesn't stop her from fasting. Clear? So if outside those two discharges, she still fasts and pray. So the only thing that stops them from fasting and pray is menstrual discharge or postnatal discharge. Any other discharge they have, they wash themselves and that area and make wudu. And they make either ghusl in some, and they make the appropriate tahara based upon their situation. But in most cases, that's just normal discharge, just make wudu. So that's concerning that matter. So the general thing they make there, appropriate tahara based upon the situation. But as for menstrual and postnatal, then there's no siyam while they're experiencing this. And if her menstrual cycle was to stop during the midday, then is she obliged to have imsak, or can she still eat? So her fasting, she in the mid of the day, her menstrual cycle stopped. Does she still need to observe? Does she need to observe imsak for the rest of the day? Meaning she should not eat anything for the rest of the day? Then she's allowed. I will discuss before that, she is allowed. Because she started the day not fasting, so she can end the rest of the day by not fasting in that case, in that scenario.
If she stops make up that day.
Yeah, she still make up that day. She still make up that day. And also the one who said that as way of just being discreet and being somewhat hikmah, that a woman who may be having her menstrual cycle, it's not for her to, in that sense it's completely, you understand, for her to eat in front of, you understand, too open in front of everyone, unnecessarily. So at times if she can be discreet, if she does it, but not to be too overt regarding this act. You understand? Like in the masjid, in the center of the masjid, it's come and eat. There's no need for you to do that. So try to be discreet in front of others. that people might then start to challenge or action unnecessarily. So that's concerning that particular matter. So also of those people, as mentioned, regarding of the condition, regarding of the person said to be majnoon, the person said to be that they are mentally ill, then such a person also not to fast, as we had discussed previously. Then the author, Hafidullah, Tabarak Ta'ala, then he went on to discuss concerning and it shows regarding concerning Aisha and concerned we were commanded. Show concerning that the matters concerning deen is based upon what we have been commanded, we fulfill, we comply. So whatever we've been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet alayhi salam, then it's for the Muslim to comply. Whether we understand the reason and the hikmah behind it or not, the fact that we understand the instruction, then that is sufficient. As for the reason and the hikmah, the wisdom and all those things that a person understands, that's not, those things come out of secondary things. As for the main thing is that the instruction is clear as to what is expected from us. Then the author, Hafidullah Tabarak Ta'ala, he mentioned, and Ibn Umar Ta'ala anhuma, قال كان رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام يعتكف 10 أواخر من رمضان متفق عليه. So he mentioned concerning hadith number 12, the 12th hadith in this series, where he mentioned regarding the hadith of Ibn Umar, that the meaning of which concerning that the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to make ittikaf in the last 10 nights or 10 days during Ramadan, and the hadith muttafaqun alayh. So this hadith is kind of somewhat to discuss concerning a matter regarding ittikaf. So this particular hadith is to kind of somewhat to cover concerning the matter regarding ittikaf. So of those acts of Ramadan that's attached to Ramadan, and more so evident in Ramadan, is the act of ittikaf. So from this hadith of Ibn Umar, it shows the permissibility concerning ittikaf in the month of Ramadan. As it mentions, typically concerning يعتكف 10 أواخر من Ramadan, that the Prophet and the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala والسلام, that he would observe ittikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So on that topic in brief, that the author, so this hadith is an evidence regarding the permissibility of performing ittikaf. As for those things that can be mentioned regarding ittikaf, one concerning meaning of ittikaf. What is ittikaf? Ittikaf, according to the ulama, in brief, لزوم المسجد لطاعة الله سبحانه وتعالى, with a person that he stays within the masjid for fixed and in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the person restricting himself in the masjid, carrying in for the purpose of doing acts of obedience for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is ittikaf. So luzum, the person fix himself to the masjid, in isolation in the masjid, and to carry out acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will consider salah, qira'atul Quran, or Islamic material that are beneficial, where the person try to remove himself from what's going on in the dunya and try to more build and transfer to busy himself with things of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cut off from the dunya. But so that's concerning, and so it is done in the form of al-ittikaf. So ittikaf is a form of the person trying to put effort regarding carrying out an act of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in a fixed environment, which is the masjid, as to be discussed. So the ulama rahimahullah, they have mentioned regarding concerning the matter of ittikaf, there's no per se a hadith that have been authenticated that discuss in general concerning the virtue of ittikaf. It does concern the hadith I've mentioned regarding the Prophet of Islam concerned discuss concern that he did ittikaf, with also after thinking the benefit of ittikaf, that of the last 10 nights we have Laylatul Qadr. So he alayhi salam kind of somewhat will stay in the masjid during those last 10 nights during Ramadan. But there's not a hadith that kind of somewhat mentioned the virtue of the act of ittikaf on its own. Clear? So, as And as mentioned by Abu Dawood al-Sajistani rahimullah in his Masahil, Ahmad ibn Hanbal قال قلت لأحمد, I said to Ahmed, تعرف في فضل اعتكاف شيء, do you know of anything that of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentioned concerning the virtue of ittikaf? And he mentioned قال لا, no, لا شيء إلا شيء ضعيف, except for things that are weak. So that's concerning the view of some taken by the ulama. As for ittikaf, that is something which is permissible. So regarding performing ittikaf in the masjid is something which is permissible by way of the Quran and the Sunnah wal Ijma. So the permissibility, the evidence regarding ittikaf, this can be found in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as mentioned, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ آكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. So I mentioned وَأَنْتُمْ آكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. So I mentioned آكِفُونَ, that you're the ones who are akif, you're the ones who are performing ittikaf in the masjid. So that shows the evidence regarding ittikaf. And also the hadith that we mentioned just now of Ibn Umar regarding this matter, regarding ittikaf, and also regarding concerning ijma. Many of the ulama have mentioned the ijma regarding the permissibility of ittikaf. Of them, many of them, Ibn Hazm, Ibn Qudama, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Abdul Barr, Ibn Rushd, all kind of somewhat have stated that there's an agreement between the ulama regarding the permissibility of performing ittikaf. As for concern the ulama also, they mention that ittikaf is not something, there's the hukum of ittikaf. So as for concerning what's the ruling pertaining to performing ittikaf, Ibn Mundhir rahimahullah have mentioned in the ijma' اجمعوا على أن ittikaf sunnah. So Ibn Mundhir have stated that there's an agreement between the ulama that performing ittikaf is deemed to be a sunnah. ولا يجب على الناس, and it is not compulsory upon the people. So that's concerning that, except in certain cases where a person can put it upon himself of making an oath that I'm going to perform ittikaf, then that's a different category. But ordinarily, ittikaf is something which is a sunnah and not compulsory to be done. As for ittikaf, we find that for men, then it is clear that the Prophet ﷺ performed ittikaf most of the time, most of the years, the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So they show the permissibility for men to perform ittikaf. As for female, are they allowed to perform ittikaf in the masajid? Ulama mentioned that there's a khilaf, a difference in the ulama, but the correct view is that ittikaf is permissible for female. It's allowed for them to perform ittikaf also in the masjid. So for female to perform ittikaf, it is permissible, just as it is permissible for men to perform ittikaf. The next matter regarding concerning the place of ittikaf, or before that, concerning hukum al-ittikaf for Ramadan. As for the hadith of Ibn Umar, it showed the permissibility of ittikaf in the masjid in Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan. So the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed ittikaf in the last, made ittikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So that's the more preferred, ideal situation for the person to perform ittikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, or whichever amount of those days he's able. Whatever amount of those days that he's able. So ideal, all 10, but if he's not, as much as he's able of those 10 days. Of those who mentioned, what's the least amount of days of ittikaf or time? An hour, half a day, Beaumont answers a day. But ala kulli hal, that a person tried according to one's ability. The person tried to, I was mentioning that it's a sunnah mu'akkada with the ulama regarding that ittikaf for the last 10 nights is preferred, highly encouraged to be done for those who are able to perform ittikaf. Ittikaf outside Ramadan. A discussion between the ulama that the permissibility of performing ittikaf outside Ramadan, but inside Ramadan is more preferred, and even more highly preferred the last 10 nights. Next, regarding of those masail relating to ittikaf, shurut ittikaf. So the conditions for ittikaf, the condition that should be fulfilled, prerequisite of ittikaf, are as follows. 1, al-Islam, the person should be Muslim. Second, aqil, the person of sound mind. So the person who's unwell mentally, then no ittikaf for them. And it says, or the person who is drunk. Not so, the person who's not sober. Third, tamyiz, that the person should be one who is of time that they are, should be of above the age where they understand things well. So it means that tamyiz doesn't mean that could be a child who's maybe the age of 11, but not yet the age of puberty. The child of 3, then there's no ittikaf for them, because they do not understand things very, very well. Very well. Fourth of those conditions, an-niyyah, having the intention. No ibadah. Innamal a'mal bin-niyyat. So it mentioned regarding of those conditions, regarding ittikaf, prerequisite of ittikaf, the person also have the niyyah, which is being done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another of those conditions would be the 5th, Taharah. So the person also Taharah, we're concerned to know that woman, also the ulama who can put this condition, that not a state of haid when nifas or the like. So according to the ulama, some of that, Taharah. Some status are a condition. 6th, that for a female performing ittikaf, she is required to have permission from her husband. So if she's married, then she should have permission from her husband.
What about the father?
They mention more so concerned to know that because her husband, so the father, yes, she should get her permission from her father, but not as with the husband is more permission by way of she have a duty to perform to him, and as wife duties towards her husband. Clear? What I mean by that? Concerning intimacy and the likes. So if she go into ittikaf, then those things now are not possible while in ittikaf. So with her husband, she needs his permission. And we said yes, with anyone, if she's under the care of anyone, she should let that person know, because they need to know concerning where she is at, because she's not in the home. So she should get their permission. She should get their consent, or let them aware of what's taking place. But if a woman who's married, then for certain. Another of those prerequisites of ittikaf, they mentioned al-masajid, that the place for ittikaf should be the masjid. By way of, it is not done in the homes, in a hall, but rather it should be done in a masjid. So a designated place for ittikaf should be the masjid. And they have a khilaf between the ulama regarding the masjid. Is it for any masjid or for specific masajid? Any masjid meaning any masjid with its jama, which is the masjid we have the general masjid with the 5 salat is established, and also Jummah is established. Salatul Jummah is established. Those who mentioned that it's specific to 3 masajid. Masjid al-Makki, al-Nabawi, Masjid al-Mecca, the Haram al-Mecca, wal-Haram al-Madani, and Bayt al-Maqdis. So you have the discussion here of the ulama world that it is restricted to those 3 masajid, nowhere else, no other masajid. So if you want to perform ittikaf, either in Masjid al-Quds, or Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina, or Masjid al-Mecca, al-Haram al-Makki, those are the masajid that you are only allowed to perform ittikaf. And that had, and so you have a discussion between the ulama regarding that matter. So you find that Jumhur of the ulama, all that is not restricted, it's preferred in those 3 masajid where the reward is more higher, but it is not restricted to those masajid only, but rather it can be done in any masjid. That is those the general things applied regarding a masjid, regarding the salawat is established and the likes. The next matter to discuss regarding ittikaf, regarding concerning things that nullifies mubtilat al-ittikaf, those things that invalid the person ittikaf. So those acts, if done, invalid the person ittikaf. Of those they mentioned in brief, and we'll end with this inshallah ta'ala for today, al-jima. So of those conditions regarding ittikaf, the person not to engage in sexual intercourse. So the person wants to do so, and that is none that have invalidated his ittikaf. So it has broken, it has invalidated his ittikaf. And second, they mention regarding that khuruj min al-masjid, that a person also, he should not leave the masjid except for valid reasons, for cases of exemptions, such as the masjid may not have per se facility for washing, taking a bath. The person can go and take a bath and come back. Now, the person might go out to the masjid just to eat and then come back in. Then for those reasons, they mentioned that those are exceptions where he's allowed. But just for say, let's go outside and walk around the block, then no. Go to his house and sit and have dinner with his wife? No. Go to work and then come back? No. So the itikaf is to spend as much time or all that time inside the masjid with a person involved concerning Quran reading, salah, azkar, things of ibadah. Nam, not to talk about things that are of not importance. Nam. So those things regarding al-ittikaf. So the person just kind of somewhat to get into, I said, the spiritual aspect regarding himself. So that's concerning of ittikaf in brief regarding some of those masahil that relates to ittikaf. So that's what the author rahimullah have mentioned regarding that matter. Then we'll go next to a next discussion regarding a hadith about the last 10 days of Ramadan. So we'll be discussing concerning matters pertaining to the last 10. We'll start discussing those matters tomorrow, bi'awnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any questions?
What does it mean in the hadith? When he says, I talked with him, then I stood up to return home, so he went with me.
Sorry?
This hadith by Safia,
That he escorted his wife back home.
so this is the permissibility of.
Hey, so also not permissible to escort. You understand that a husband for safety reasons to escort one's wife back home. So yes, so it showed the person can leave, but with valid reason, to eat and take a wash, escort. You understand? So it may be an emergent, something that comes up that's an emergency. As an emergency, then those valid reasons, yes, the person can leave the masjid for valid reasons.
With the Ittikaf, is that restricted just to 10 nights, the last 10 nights?
And I said the Prophet indicates that he missed that it can be beyond those last 10 nights. So it could be personally, I said the person want to add to those in Ramadan, want to add to those last 10.
So some people do it like 3 days a month.
Yeah, but I said between the ulama also discussed regarding outside Ramadan is allowed. Of those who mentioned it is permissible for a person to do itikaf outside Ramadan, but Ramadan is the better time for it to be done. Right? Outside Ramadan, it can be done with some other, but so what the person, whatever this person's system is regarding 3 days, 10 days, that's with them according to their ability, but not to. Yeah, so we'll leave that inshallah ta'ala, and we'll continue tomorrow. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Huh?
I was gone.
It was done?
I was gone. I was dozing.
Oh, we're back again. Get ready for the next lesson. Yeah, we're still on. Yeah, we're still, what time is it now? Yeah, we're still, because the other